Before I started this test, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I discovered something that you really need to be aware of, because one of these cameras is the clear winner, and I would advise to stay well away from the other one, especially if you want to use this for video. So make sure you watch the whole video and get to grips with both of these cameras so that you make the best decision for you. These tests aren't scientific tests. I'm using these cameras in the way that I would use the cameras on an everyday basis out in the world to see how these cameras would perform realistically. The Lumix is currently £1,999 or $2,000. Sony is just a little bit more at $2,399. If you do have the money to spend, you can even get the S5 Mark II with a brand new lens that's coming out, the 14 to 28 macro lens for $2,499. Look, this is subjective, and I know a lot of people are going to moan about this in the comments, but it's just my honest opinion. Sony's got a great image, no denying it. It looks very nice. However, the colours, for me, the way I've tested it, I've tested S-Log2, S-Log3, different profiles within, but it's not consistent. In this bedroom shot here where I've got my colour chart, it looks pretty much the same as the Lumix. But then when you're outside, in different situations, the colours are just completely different. The sky, for a start, is this strange hue. Now, it looks nice, but it's very oversaturated and a little bit unnatural. I don't like to go that far. The greens in trees are always very desaturated and blue. Now, it's not a bad look, it's nice, but I want to have a natural image first and then change it if I want to. I prefer the starting place of Vlog and the Lumix camera. It's easy to work with. You can get it to a place, you can make it look like a Canon, you can make it look like a Sony if you want to, whereas the Canons and the Sonys kind of have their look baked in. I'm not going to say either one is better than the other because it's personal preference. Let me know what you think between the two. Somebody actually asked me if I would do a standard colour profile comparison, and honestly, I don't really like them. They're not bad. In controlled situations, you can get really nice colours with them. If you're going to spend this much on a camera and it's got a log profile, I know if you're not used to colour grading, it can be a bit of a ball ache, but it's well worth using the log profiles that these cameras have in because they look so much better. All you've got to do, in fact, I'll leave a video up here if you want a quick colour grading tutorial. Go and check this one out after this video because it's going to show you a simple 3-step process of how I get nice and quick, easy colours from these cameras. When it comes to slow motion, both of these cameras have a little bit of a crop in 50 frames per second. Everyone's been crying about the Lumix S5 II, saying it's still got a crop in 50. But so has the Sony. Yes, the other Sonys might not have a crop in those modes, but we're talking double the price, nearly. Let's stop moaning about it. It's a crop. We can deal with it. We dealt with it when we were on cropped sensors before we had full frame, so we can deal with it now. I don't care. The data rates for both of them are pretty similar. 140 on the Sony, 150 on the Lumix, and then when you go into 50 frames, it's 200 megabits per second on both. To the human eye, you can't tell. Both of them look really good. So I'm not going to start saying you need this is better because it's got an extra 10 megabits per second. Can we get over it already? This is the thing. A lot of people are like, oh, the specs are better on this camera. Let's not look at the specs. Let's look at the image. Let's have a look how good it is, how easy it is to color grade, how easy is it to use. Those things are more important than the spec sheets. Come on. Low light, no surprises here. The Sony was very good. The Lumix held up well. If you don't do a lot of evening shooting or low light shots like this, the Lumix is absolutely fine. If I'm going to be vlogging outside in the dark and it's a little bit grainy, I don't care. In those situations, I'm not trying to get the perfect image, so it doesn't matter. If you're lighting something professionally and you want a professional look, then you're going to light it properly. It doesn't matter how good the camera is in low light, really. So I feel like we need to stop relying on the low light capabilities and make sure we light things properly. It does come in handy though, I have to say. It's nice to know that you can bump up the ISO and not worry too much. That doesn't mean you should discount the Lumix though, because it still has a dual native ISO of 4000. It looks fantastic. These are some shots that I got in Tokyo shooting at 4000 ISO. Looks great, no noise whatsoever, so super happy with that. Just want to say a quick thank you to Lumix UK and Hire a Camera who supplied with these cameras for this video. Now if you are in the UK and you need to hire equipment, I would look no further than Hire a Camera. Every time I speak to them on the phone, they're really nice. Not only that though, the service is phenomenal. They always make sure that the gear arrives on time. Just a great company and I can't recommend them enough. Stabilisation, this is an interesting one. I want to see what the corners are looking like to see if we're getting into that warping, wobbly jello effect going on. I'm not trying to be super smooth, I'm just walking at a reasonable pace to see what it looks like, because this is what it's like when I vlog. Some people walk a little bit slower like this, but I'm impatient, so I walk a little bit quicker. Now I'm on steady shot active on the Sony and E-stabilisation on the Lumix. So it's cropped in a little bit on the Lumix. I don't know what it's like on the Sony. Here we go again, just a walking vlog style. Not trying to be particularly smooth, I just want to know what it looks like, what the camera can do under these situations, because this is how I'm going to use the cameras, and this is how a lot of people would use them as well. They both did a great job. However, I must say the Lumix had a slight little bit of wobble, that jello effect, only slightly, and we're talking 16mm, so it's a very wide lens. But things were different when going handheld and doing a walking shot. At 24mm, the Lumix absolutely smashed it, to the point where it didn't even look like Sony had the stabilization turned on. And I just used the normal stabilization modes. I didn't go to E-stabilization mode. On the Lumix, if you don't know already, it's 200% better than the previous model, which was already the best. So if you go to E-stabilization, you're going to get even more smoothness out of the camera, and I was blown away. Lumix is your way forward if you want better stabilization. Autofocus. This is probably why you're here, isn't it? A lot of people want to know which camera is better for autofocus, or is the S5 Mark II good enough to compete with the Sonys now? If I didn't tell you which one was which, you wouldn't know. They both perform perfectly well. The Lumix seemed to track humans further away than the Sony did, and I felt a little bit more comfortable that I was going to be in focus when walking around and coming back into the frame, even when spinning round. Both of them even stood up to the sneeze test. The Sony seemed a little bit slower at f1.8 on the 50mm lens, but you can change the settings. I had it on the default settings. If you want it a little bit quicker, you can do that. But the Lumix did a great job. Everybody's been saying it's not as good. It did a great job of keeping up. In some ways, it was even quicker, and it looks natural. Both of them look really natural. I wouldn't say one is better than the other when it comes to human tracking or following a face. The Sony seemed a little bit better in tracking mode when focusing on smaller objects. Even when taking the object out of the frame, it regained focus when putting it back in the frame most of the time, but not all the time. The Lumix wasn't as good when using smaller objects, but I spoke to the Lumix guys and they said it works better when using larger objects when it takes up a certain percentage of the screen. So I tested it and they were right. It performed a lot better. But the thing is, how often do you fling things around like this anyway? So it's kind of a bit of a pointless test. As long as it tracks it while you're doing camera moves, I guess that's what matters most. Autofocus, the same. When it comes to tracking, the Sony's slightly better. If I tell this to Lumix though, they're going to be on it. They will. They'll probably come out with an update. If possible, they'll make that happen. Within the Lumix, we've got the option to shoot 6K, which if that's something you're after, the Sony doesn't have it. We've also got anamorphic modes, which is super handy if you're using lenses like this Shure anamorphic lenses, amazing lenses, so you can monitor in the right aspect ratio on the back of the camera, which is amazing. You can't do that on the Sony. You have to plug in an external monitor and then change the aspect ratio on there if you want to do that. And we can also film in open gate mode, so it gives us more of an image. I'll talk about that in my last video if you want to know more. The Lumix camera doesn't have a record limit, so we don't have to worry about stopping record and then starting record again after half an hour, which is phenomenal, especially if you're filming speeches or long interview videos, for example. You don't have to worry about that anymore, and I think that's amazing. That's what we've been waiting for. Now this is where everything falls apart. So far it's kind of neck and neck really. You could choose either one and be happy, but this is the problem. When I was testing how long these cameras would record for, the Sony overheated after 17 minutes of use. 17 minutes. That is not enough to record a YouTube video like this. It's not enough to record a wedding ceremony or a speech or anything like that. That's a worry. Have you ever had the overheating warning on a camera before, especially on a job? It's not very nice feeling. It's stressful. You don't want that. And I'm not the only one that's experienced this. Everybody's talking about it as well. I don't want anybody to fall into the trap of buying an expensive camera like this and all the lenses that go with it, and then find out that it's not going to work for the job that you need it to do. Because let's face it, these things are expensive. They're not cheap. You're going to be dropping a lot of wonga on this stuff. For that reason, this is not a video camera. And this is the problem with the marketing. So these cameras are hybrid cameras. We can't forget that. They have video features built in, but they are not video cameras. This one is now. It's a hybrid camera, but I'm going to be using it for all professional stuff and all my YouTube videos because it makes sense and it does the job and it works. It's reliable. The Sony A7 IV is not a video camera. If you are using it for vlogging and you're doing short bursts and you're not doing anything professional where you're getting paid, then you'd be alright with this camera. Anything else, I wouldn't recommend it at all. The thing with Sony is, to get a usable video camera, you have to spend a lot more money. If you're thinking about getting one of these cameras, mainly for video, there's only one option, the Lumix S5 Mark II. If you want to know more about the S5 Mark II and to see some more example footage and what the 6K looks like, and I did a video that you can check out here, and it will give you a bit more of a feel of what this camera can actually do, and it's amazing. So go and check that one out, and I will see you in the next one.